Honest talk about grief and loss, no fixing, no platitudes, just real conversations. Grab a beverage and let's have a chat. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Mourning Coffee Podcast. I am your host, Brooke Carlock, and today I am joined by Liz Quinn. She is a writer, a podcaster, and a grief advocate. That probably all sounds familiar. I feel like we do a lot of the same things. Her work centers on holding space for love and loss and healing. She is the creator of the Healing Hearts podcast, where she shares honest conversations about grief and resilience and kind of the quiet ways that healing unfolds. So right up my audience's alley. After the loss of her daughter Alivia and her parents, Liz felt called to create spaces where grief was welcomed without judgment or the pressure to move on. And I love that. Her most recent book is called Held in Our Hearts, and that offers reflections on pregnancy and infant loss. And that is not something that I get to talk about a lot on my show because I don't have any personal experience with that. So I am super excited to have this conversation. So welcome, Liz. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I am honored to be here and excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. If you are watching live, please feel free to leave any questions or comments in the chat and we will get to them when we can. But otherwise, we are going to dive right in here. So, Liz, could you just share a little bit about your kind of story and background and how you came to start your podcast and writing and all the grief work that you do?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. My first real experience with loss is the loss of that you said in the beginning is the loss of my daughter, Alivia. She was born July 23rd, 2008, so she'll be 18 this year, which
Wow.
is crazy.
Yeah.
And she was a surprise pregnancy. My husband and I had just gotten married in that June of 2007, and I got pregnant in November, and
Mhm.
we were not expecting a baby. I was preparing to be a elementary education teacher, and
Okay.
my husband was still in college, still
Wow.
had 2 or 3 years of school left to be a nuclear engineer. So babies was not on our radar at all. Like we were waiting until he graduated, all the things. We had a plan, and then God had a different plan.
Yeah.
And so we were, as scared and terrified as we were for this pregnancy, we were also very excited and welcomed it with open arms. And we had, for the most part, a very normal pregnancy.
Yeah.
I had gestational diabetes, but I was able to control it with nutrition and things like that. And went in for our 40-week appointment
Mhm.
on July 22nd, and everything was looking good. I was starting to have some contractions, and the doctor said, go home and walk, 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 because that's like the best thing
Yep.
you can
Yep.
do to induce labor and all of those things. And that's exactly what we did. I actually remember like walking the halls of our apartment while my husband was doing his math assignment, while also doing on another separate piece of paper, you know, counting, like
Yeah.
contracting for with so
Oh
many
my
minutes
gosh.
or whatever. And so we went for a nice long walk at dinner time. The doctor called, said, "Come on in, let's get you checked." And went into the office and got checked. And she said, "We're going to take you to the hospital. You're going to walk the halls, and hopefully, we're having a baby today."
Mhm.
And I was admitted around 10 p.m. on July 22nd and labored through the night, and everything was going well, was going successful up until, unfortunately, quote unquote, it didn't.
Yeah.
Um, I delivered Olivia on July 23rd, and she came out with a slight heartbeat and not breathing. And so
Mm.
she then immediately was taken to the NICU where she would spend the next 34 hours under observation. And we were told very early on that there was not any real brain activity. However, they were going to do a 24-hour, observation because babies
Yeah.
can be resilient and you just don't know. Ultimately, Olivia's tube went into her esophagus,
Okay.
and we had to make the decision to either retube or take it out and just let her have her moment. And we kind of took that as a sign from her that, like, she'd been with us for 34 hours. At that point,
Yeah.
we were only holding on for her to say goodbye to some family members that were still trying to come from all parts of the country. And we just decided that like it was time to say goodbye. And so she spent the last 8 minutes of her life in my husband's arms.
Aw.
And so that's a little bit of Olivia's story.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 10 years later, we lost my parents. Lost my mom. I lost my dad in 2018 and my mom in 2020. And losing my parents back to back shattered me in ways I can't explain. My identity was shifted to all things, and
Yeah.
it opened up even old wounds of Olivia, because pregnancy and infant loss is such a taboo subject, and it was 18 years ago. It was even more
Yeah.
taboo than it is today. I think I started to grieve her at the same time I was grieving my parents.
Yeah.
And so, which kind of led me to where I am now, that like, because I was cracked open differently and things like that, I started to realize that like grief is something that's been a part of my life that's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't want to not talk about it. I don't not want to share about it. And so it led me to create the Healing Hearts podcast, which is the very first thing in the grief space that I created. And it took me probably a good solid year to even say, yes, I'm going to do it, because imposter syndrome is something that's very real.
It is.
And then it led to just being connected to more people in this grief space and more support and more realizing that like people need to speak out and need to
Yeah.
talk about how it's, grief is probably loss, and grief is one of the most universal things we're going to go through.
Yeah.
Yet it's one of the things that's the most not talked about thing in our society.
Yeah. I have so many follow-ups just from that. But so first, what do you know exactly what happened with Olivia? Like what?
We don't have exact answers, no.
Okay.
So we did have an autopsy done after she was born and everything, and the medical examiner kind of said that he thinks it's Group B strep.
Okay.
And Group B strep is a national living organism that you have, and you get tested to find out if you have it or if you don't. And
Right.
if you do, you get antibiotics as soon as you're admitted into the hospital and all the things. I knew we had Group B strep, so I
Mhm.
had antibiotics, all of the things. I actually had one extra dose, so it's really unsure if that's the case.
Okay.
We have gone on to have 3 other children. So when we went on to have Olivia's sister Zoe, we went through some additional testing and things like that. And one of those tests was getting tested for Group B strep very early on. And then if
Right.
I was tested positive, I would take an antibiotic and then get tested again. Well, it
Yeah.
comes to find out that I was almost always positive, even
Okay.
after taking an antibiotic.
Huh.
So, conclusion is that I probably have a higher concentration of that natural living organism, and we would have had to done all kinds of tests to really find out how
Yeah.
much of an antibiotic I would have needed to kill it so I could have a vaginal birth.
Okay.
Because Olivia was a vaginal birth and all of that trauma and all of that, we went on to have just C-sections after we had
Okay.
Zoe, or had Olivia. So there was no real reason to continue, other than to be like, if my doctor really wanted to document it and make some, book or,
Right.
or whatever. But really, all we wanted was to bring me a healthy baby.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. At that point, that's the goal.
yeah.
How long after losing Olivia did you have Zoe? I'm just curious how
2
long you would.
years. 2 years.
Were you
Uh,
just terrified at that point? I feel like I would be so
Oh, pregnancy after
nervous.
loss is a whole nother,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a beast. It's a
Yeah.
total beast. I mean, right after Olivia was born, we were like, no. Like, I immediately got to put an IUD put in, and it was just like,
Yeah.
I'm not having another baby. And we didn't know, I mean, we never really knew when we would. I think originally we were just going to go back to our original plan, which would be
Yeah.
after Nathan graduated. And then things change, and you just kind of get thrown into situations. And one of the situations for myself is my husband's cousin got married, and she had a 4-month-old, and at
Okay.
that wedding she was dancing with her 4-month-old, and she kind of runs up to me and my husband and says, do you want to hold him? And I didn't really have a minute to like take a minute, and I held
Yeah.
him, and as I was holding him, it was in that moment that I was like, yeah, I want a baby, I'm
Yeah.
ready. And we, the following month, got my IUD taken out and then started that process of trying to have a baby. So it was before Olivia was 2, before Olivia was even a year old. We were on the
Right.
journey of trying to have a child again.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like miscarriages and pregnancy and infant loss are the the things that not a lot of people talk about. Like you said, not I mean, back then people weren't talking about it, and they might be a little bit more now. But I know I have had, family members and some friends that have had miscarriages, and they always explain it like it's one of those things where they never know anyone else that it's happened to until it happens to them, and then all of a sudden so many women like come out of the woodwork saying like, oh, I went through the same thing, but like no one seems to be talking about it out in the open or just bringing it up in, everyday conversations. Why do you think that is? And have you seen a shift in people talking about it?
I have definitely seen a shift in people talking about it. And then the sort of part of that is because I'm in that space.
Yeah.
Being in the grief space and then having the loss of Alivia, I do definitely being on Instagram and being on social media, my newsfeed is going to be filled with it a little bit more just
Right.
because
Yes.
of the space that I work in. But I have seen just a shift in being more open and talking about it. And honestly, I think the reason people don't talk about it is because we're always so concerned about how uncomfortable it's going to make someone because it
Mm-hmm.
is uncomfortable. I do have to find, as you go through this grief journey and as you go through, you have to kind of pick and choose how much of your story you're going to share and what you're
Yeah.
going to say, and if you're going to go further or not. I do not ever deny Olivia as my child. I've done it once, and it was the very first time I was asked if I had any children. And at the
Yeah.
time, it was like 3 months after Olivia was born, and I said no because I didn't know where I stood. And I immediately got back to my car and bawled
Right.
my eyes
Felt
out
wrong.
and
Yes.
and knew in that moment I would never do it. But there are times where I don't necessarily say that she died. There are times when people ask me how many children I have, and I say I have four because I have four.
Right.
If they decide to pry and ask more questions, and if I feel like I want to give them that, and they can hold that space for
Yeah.
me, then I will continue and carry my stuff. But there's sometimes
Totally
where
get it.
you have to gauge the people, and those people are going to be like, I don't think you can hold that space, and I don't want to
Yep.
feel uncomfortable, and I don't want to have to like hold your uncomfortableness.
Exactly. Yeah, I've had that situation where you're in like the grocery store line or
Yeah.
something, just some random place, and it's like,
Yeah.
do I explain that I lost my 10-year-old daughter, or do I just check out and move on and
Yeah.
say, yeah, and
Yeah.
say I have three kids instead of, I have two that are alive and one that is not.
Right.
So
Yeah. There's just a
yeah,
navigating that. Yes.
but it's weird because I had the same situation where someone asked me, and I said, I have two living sons. And I just said that I have two. And then it was like, like I started crying because it felt so wrong. And I was like,
Yeah.
nope, she's always going to be there. It's always going to be three.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally get that. So I want to go back because you mentioned the word identity. And that's one of the things I was thinking when you were kind of going through your story, because I feel like you were this pretty young person when you got pregnant with Olivia, and it was unexpected. So that was kind of an identity shift for you where you had your plans, but it was like, oh, okay, now I've got to shift to I'm becoming a mom. And then you lose Olivia, and then it's a shift to what do I do now? I'm assuming, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
can we talk through that?
Absolutely.
And then we'll get to your parents because I
Yeah.
went through this. I
Yeah.
have both of my parents are gone too, so I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
relate. So
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, like I said, my husband and I were just freshly married, so I was just learning how to be a wife. Like, and how to like coexist as husband and wife and not just fiance or boyfriend and girlfriend.
yeah.
And him being in full-time school and me trying to find a teacher position. I was a substitute teacher at the time. And you know, but I was ready. Like, and as scary as that can sound, like becoming pregnant is scary, but there's something true about that maternal instinct that just takes over,
Yeah.
and so like when we heard that first heartbeat, it was like I'm gonna be her mom, and I was ready to be her mom. And then when we realized that she was not going to come home and that we were going to have to say goodbye and that we were going to walk out of the hospital with a box instead of a baby, um, I didn't know how. It took time to figure out how to be a mom without a physical baby being here.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think. I think for that first year, the only way I felt like I could be her mom is by doing all the things I could do in honor of her.
Yeah.
It wasn't until after I had my other children that I was able to realize that like mothering them is also mothering her.
Yeah.
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 And so
Do you have any
she
particular things that you still do? Or what did you do then,
so
versus
like
what you do now?
that very first year, because I didn't have a full-time job and my husband was still in school, we could not afford to get her a headstone.
Mhm.
Let alone did we have like a plot for her to be buried on or anything
Yeah.
like that. And so my mom and dad, because they were older, although they weren't, into the point of like we're thinking of they were going to be dying, but they were thinking ahead. They bought a plot. And so they agreed to let Olivia be at the head of their plot. So that's where she was buried. And then eventually we just kind of like we put fences around her, and then I would decorate the fence and make wreaths and stuff like that. And that's how, in that
Yeah.
very beginning, I was able to be distracted, but also grieving, but also mothering, all of the things. And then one of the things that we still do today that we even do with our own kids is at Christmas time. Um, Obviously, I was supposed to have a 5-month-old and wanted nothing to do with celebrating. And we had told our family that we were not celebrating Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, it was just not something we wanted to do. And they were very respectful and understood. But my mom, growing up, she had a teddy bear tree that she would set up in the kitchen, and it was full of beautiful white lights and beautiful garland and teddy bears. And my moms tend to know a little best sometimes, and so she was just kind of like, I'm gonna give you this 6-foot tree, all the white lights, all the garland. I'll keep the teddy bears, and if you feel like you need a tree, then you have one. Just leave it in the
Oh,
car. And I remember telling her, I'm not taking this tree. And she just took it in there. And there was one evening, sitting alone in our apartment, and it was, you know, we were in Wisconsin at the time, so it was
yeah.
dark and it was cold and it was snowy, and it just seemed really lonely and isolating in the apartment.
Yeah.
And so went to the car, started putting on the tree, started putting the white lights on, and started to realize that like we could decorate this with ornaments that reminded us of Olivia. And then we could
Yeah.
ask family members for Christmas presents to remind us of Olivia. And we still put up, the tree has changed a little bit. It's not the same 6-foot tree that my mom gave me,
Yeah.
but it's the very first Christmassy type of thing that goes up in our house. And
Oh,
it keeps getting it used to be we'd put it on like the first weekend in after Thanksgiving, and now it's like almost like November 1st hits and it goes up.
it's up.
It's like yeah, it's so, and it's
Oh,
a tradition we do with all of the kids, and they love it and ask for it to go up and things like that. And so that's
yeah.
probably the biggest thing that we do
I
that we
love
have
that.
kept as a tradition. So
Sometimes moms know what they're talking about.
they do. And I think now that my mom is gone,
Hmm.
that tree means so much more. It
Yeah.
always meant a lot, but I wouldn't even have this tradition if it wasn't for her. And
Yeah.
so to know
That's
that she's
great.
gone, it's kind of like hers there too. So
Yeah. Oh, what a it's a bittersweet memory, I'm sure.
it
It's
very,
like one
very
of
much
those
is.
happy
Yeah.
sad things.
Yeah.
It's happy sad. So,
Yeah.
talking about your mom, if we could go back to the identity thing then, what was the identity shift or loss like with you after losing both of your parents?
I felt like I didn't know who I was,
Mm.
to be honest. My dad died first, and because he was my first death of a parent, I think I took him a little harder than I did my mom.
Okay.
Even though my mom was my best friend and we were really close. She was also diagnosed with dementia and had Alzheimer's. So I
Yeah.
was already slowly losing her, even before my dad died. But losing my dad, it was just kind of like, oh, this is where I'm at in stage in my life is losing parents, and that's
Yeah.
a really hard realization. And then 2 years later, when my mom died, it was just kind of like, who do I want to be, and what do I want to be remembered for, and it just went back to like remembering like I love my parents and they did so much for us. And sacrificed so much. And as an adult, you realize all of that. As a child, you're in it and you're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
but now later. And so, as much as I loved my mom and who she was, I felt like she always regretted that she didn't do more. with her
That
life.
makes sense.
She gave
Yep.
so much for us and things like that, that I think that it was kind of for me as like, what else can I do? Then as much I loved being a stay-at-home mom and being with my kids, what else can I do that's more than just a mom?
Yeah.
What else can I show my kids, that they can do? And that's kind of where I started to dive into my faith a little bit more. I decided to dive into all of the things that were starting to make me new again in a
Yeah.
sense, because I'm not the same person. I was not the same person I was when I
No.
was 24 and lost my
Yep.
daughter. Not the same person when I lost my dad. Not the same person after I lost my daughter.
Yeah.
I lost my mom, and so I just kept evolving in a sense.
Yeah. When you say, because your dad died suddenly or
Um,
was it
Not
unexpected?
exactly. So my dad was diagnosed with esophageal cancer
Okay.
in um, uh, 2017. And
Okay.
then he had his first, fun fact is that he had his first chemo treatment the same day that my youngest was born.
Oh.
Um, yeah. And so, and then about 9 months later, he died. And he had what you called, uh, he had went through all the chemo and did really, really well, went back to work after even having the chemo, and then he had post chemo reaction. And
Okay.
so July of 2018, he reacted to the chemo that he had received 2 months before, and he
Mm.
was weak, and it was just it kind of went downhill, and eventually we believe that his cancer had returned into his lung. And eventually when they were
Okay.
doing the biopsy to find out if the cancer had returned to his lung, they punctured his lung. And so then
Wow.
in the process of all that, he was admitted into the hospital, admitted to a nursing home, and then the nursing home, we believe he probably got pneumonia. And
Okay.
just kind of went from there. Like I
Yeah.
left him in the nursing home on a Tuesday, and then the following Tuesday I got a phone call that he died.
Mm.
So we weren't we knew that he was probably never going to leave the nursing home, but I definitely didn't think it was going to be a week later. I
Yeah.
figured we had a couple of months.
And how, like, around how old were you when this was all happening?
My dad died, I was like 34, 35,
Okay.
35, 36 years old.
Yeah, so young to lose
Yeah.
parents. I
Yeah.
mean, I always
Yeah.
think I'm young and I was in my like early 40s, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
that's even
Yeah. I mean, my
younger.
parents were 71 and
Yeah.
72 when they died.
Okay.
So they weren't like old. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, unfortunately, cancer and Alzheimer's just took their life too soon.
That's a lot for you to go through though, to have to watch
Yeah.
that. I remember like my
Yeah.
dad died of a heart attack and it was instant, but it was a total shock. Like we had no
Yeah.
clue it was coming. So that one hit me, I think, harder than my mom because she was pancreatic cancer
Yeah.
and was going through all the treatments and you could steadily see it, getting worse and worse. So I
Yes.
was much more prepared for that one. Plus I had already lost my daughter and at that point I
Yeah.
just didn't care about anything else. But yeah, losing both parents, you just kind of are like, "Oh, all right, what now?"
Yeah.
Like, it's a
Yeah.
very bizarre
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is very, very odd, and you just kind of figure out what you're gonna do next, and you just kind of like now that like it's been 5 and 7 years, like as I'm going through life, I like there's just moments where I wish I could call my mom,
yeah,
like in these moments, and especially parenting young children. Like
yep,
I have a 15, 12, and 8-year old. Like I'm in the prime seasons of like
yes,
teenagerhood sucks. What did you
yep.
do? Or like I have an 8-year-old who's struggling through anxiety and had his
Oh,
first what kind of he has anxiety attacks, and I would love to just be
yeah,
like tell my mom to tell me it's okay, because when a mom tells you it's okay, it all feels better. You
yep,
know.
absolutely.
So
Yeah, oh
yeah.
my gosh, I totally get that. There's so many times where I go and I like pick up my phone, it's like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
no one to call."
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't call them anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So, kind of shifting gears a little bit, but just because I'm curious, how much do your current kids participate in anything that has to do with Olivia? Like, do
No,
you do you
they're her
make them a
sister.
part of
Hmm.
things?
They know about their sister from the day since the day Olivia was born. Day
Yeah.
Zoe was born. Um, she has been a part of our life since and always will be. There are moments that Logan, my youngest, he'll see a butterfly and he'll go and play with it because that's he's playing with his sister.
Oh,
Um, that, yeah, I mean, Zoe, now that she's 15, she definitely has a lot more of like that what if grief.
Yeah.
Because she wonders if they'd share a room because they'd only be 2 years apart and things like that. Grayson will often, my 12-year-old, I wish Olivia didn't have to die. Like all of
Yeah.
those things, because she is just a part of who we are. We celebrate. Like I said, we do the Olivia Christmas tree. We celebrate her birthday, and do something as a family every year,
Yeah.
for that and stuff like that. So she's just part of our conversation, and kids will just ask
Yeah.
randomly on a Tuesday afternoon, a question or something. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the experiences just recently is my 8-year-old. We were watching TV, and we have streaming devices, and so there was a streaming commercial coming on for an RSV shot,
Hmm.
and they talk about how babies have trouble breathing on the commercial, and so my son knows the story that Olivia was born, with a slight heartbeat but not
Yeah.
breathing. So he asked, he's like, if this shot would have been around, would it have saved
Oh.
Olivia? And
Yeah.
we have to explain to him that no, Olivia didn't have RSVP, but like his wheels are already turning.
Right. It's there.
You
She's
know,
there.
he's
Yeah.
never met her, but he knows her story, so he's gonna think of like this might have been a solution.
Yeah.
Like I mean, and that blows my mind that like, and so
That's
I'm just
awesome.
grateful. I'm
Yeah, I think that's great.
yeah,
I think
holding
go ahead.
space for their grief and our grief and Olivia has created compassionate, empathetic children.
Yeah, that's amazing. I also have a Grayson, by the way. Mine's 20. I have a 20-year-old Grayson. Um, he's my
Uh,
handful, that one.
I would say my Grayson's my handful too.
Yeah, yeah. He's all my gray hairs are from that kid, but love him to death. But man,
Yes.
um, so I love that talking about including the kids, and I think it kind of ties into one of the things that you talk about a lot, like on your podcast and in your grief work, is that like healing and grieving is not about moving on.
Mm-mm.
So, what do you think healing, or I hate to use the word healing because you're never really over it,
Right.
you know? It's
Right.
you're never really completely healed. It's
Yeah.
just different. So what did that look like for you? I'm interested kind of what your grief process was like.
It's definitely ebbed and flowed over the years. Like when we first lost Olivia, the my grieving process was I was sad a lot.
Yeah.
That first stages, that first acute grief where you have to come home with a box and not a baby.
Mhm.
Um, some people explain it that they were angry. I was just sad. I found any and every which way, like I said, to honor and keep her alive as much as possible. And then when Zoe was born, she brought a lot of hope into our life. I'm in the process of, so you talked about I wrote the book Held in Our Hearts.
Right.
I'm in the process of also doing a follow-up book on pregnancy after loss
Okay.
and sharing what it's like to have a baby after,
Yeah.
and that scariness and all that stuff. But in the process of writing Zoe's story and her pregnancy, I really made me realize how like that first year of marriage, me and Nate were so excited to be parents, and then that second year of marriage we were devastated, and we
Yeah.
were just full of exhaustion and sadness. And then finally that third year of marriage, he Olivia brought us, not Olivia, Zoe brought us that hope, and that like life can be good again
Yeah.
while holding space for your loss and the grief. And I can look at my kids now and feel joy and laughter, but also be like, I wonder if Olivia would have laughed at this joke. And
Yeah.
there is no or. It is an and. It's this and I think that's
Yeah.
something that lots of times we feel like we have to have. Well, we can't have, we can't be sad and feel joyful.
Right.
Oh, absolutely you can.
Yes.
There's no, and there's no manual. So
No.
what I did with Olivia after losing her, I definitely didn't do, 10 years later after losing my parents. I was a different person. I had children to take care of, and so I definitely didn't stay in bed and
Yeah.
cry because I could, when I lost Olivia. But after, my parents died, I still had to get up and make
Yeah.
lunches. I still had to get them to school. I do know that there's a point in there where I don't remember how I got from point A to point B. I just did it.
Yeah.
Like
I
there
definitely
is,
have those as well.
yeah, there's just a moment where you're just like, oh, it's the end of the day. Well, no one, they're all good. They got to school. I don't know how I did it, but I did it.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I think
And
that's just kind of, you're not healed. You just kind of, eventually you just one step at a time, one moment at a time, and be prepared to take 4 steps back sometimes. And that's
definitely.
okay.
Yeah, I love
So,
that. Uh, so, what led you then to kind of the podcasting and the books, and how did that
honestly,
end up as a space
it
to
was
hold your grief?
so it was really just being a part of the grief community that we have kind of created here on social media
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So after my mom died, I decided to dive into my own health and wellness, and went on to really focus on nutrition and working out and making sure I was taking care of myself. And in that process, I started to share more about that on social media. And through that, layers of grief and loss started to outpour from me as well.
Yeah.
And through that, I started to meet people that have experienced loss and that have experienced things and also doing things with it. And
Right.
so I went on to decide to do the podcast just because I felt like I really enjoyed sharing my story, and it was really healing for myself to every time I share my story.
Yep.
Plus I enjoyed hearing other people's stories and connecting and really having that Me Too moment.
Agreed.
That Me Too. And support group was such a big part of after I lost Olivia and
Okay.
going and having those Me Too. And so that's kind of where the podcast started. And that's where it's really anyone is welcome on the podcast. If you have a story to share and you
Yeah.
want to share it, every story matters. So come on on.
That's great.
And then just kind of evolved from there to wanting to write and share my story. And so I started doing shared my parents' story in a anthology book, and then I shared Olivia's story in an anthology book, which then turned into, okay, there's a lot of stories of pregnancy and infant loss that could be shared,
Yeah.
and wanted to create a resource that could be put in these boxes that we're taken home in instead of our child. I
Yeah.
know that a lot of growth has come and happened in what's put in those boxes. I just remember when I was sent home with the box with a blanket and some keepsakes, there's just a bunch of pamphlets, and there was just like, you can go here for this and you can go here for
Right.
this and you can go here for that, and it was not the same. And I know that so many people are doing so many things, but a lot of that also requires you to want to pick up your phone and
Yeah.
to scroll to find it on Instagram, or to pick up the phone to make a phone call.
Yeah.
Where in the instance of Making Held in Our Hearts, the book, it is literally a reflection. It's got a collection of 8 stories, different stories that have gone through pregnancy and infant loss,
Okay.
miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth. All of those are in there. Plus, it's got a list of resources, and it's got some grounding practices and
Yeah.
journals, things like that. So it's like, this can go inside the box and it's tangible, and you can look at it when you need it and put it away when you can't.
That's
So,
amazing. I love that. And I will leave links also in the show notes for the both the book and the podcast as well for anyone who's listening later. So, for someone listening who maybe they're experiencing pregnancy or infant loss and they're feeling kind of invisible, what would you want them to know? What would you tell them to do?
well, first, you're not alone. You're not invincible. You're not alone. And the feelings you're feeling are completely and utterly okay and valid.
Yeah.
That is number one, is that you can feel whatever you're feeling because you're allowed. Your grief is your grief, and it is your loss is your loss. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And honestly, the next thing I would say is find somebody that you can share and talk to. Whether you want to go to a support group or whether you have one friend that you think will just sit with you and hold space for you,
Yeah.
that is most important, because it does feel isolating and alone. And if you're not ready to go on to a support group or go
Yeah.
on to social media and do a Google search of some sort of infant loss or child loss or anything like that, sitting with someone is huge.
Definitely.
It really, and not having to explain or anything to someone that just sits with you. It's
Yeah.
amazing how much presence really is the key to those very beginnings of grief.
Agreed.
I don't need you to say I'm sorry. I don't
Yeah.
need you to say those platitudes of at least you could, or all the things. Like, I understand that those are coming from a place of kindness and
Yeah.
compassion in some form, but it devalidates what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Literally, you can just
Definitely.
take my hand and you can say sorry, and that is it.
Yeah.
Because that holding my hand and just the presence of you there literally speaks more volumes than you trying to keep going. You don't need to word vomit me.
Right.
Literally,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Find your people. I say that in my
yeah,
book. That's one
yeah,
of the things that I talk about is just,
yeah.
and a lot of times it's not who you would expect it to be, but
No,
it's people who are capable of just showing up and letting you cry or talk or sit and be
yeah.
sad or whatever it is that you need.
And I think other thing is to be important to remember is that people are going to be there for a season. And
Yeah.
so sometimes in that acute grief, you're going to have that season, and those people will be there then. They might not be there 10 years later.
Yep.
And that's okay, because those were the people you needed in that moment. You
Yeah.
have new people moving forward. And that's not just in grief, that's in life.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's one thing that I think as you grow up, you expect that you're going to have the same friends forever. And that would be wonderful and that's great. But that's not always how it works.
Yeah.
You grow and you evolve even in life, because, we're not unscathed from things happening to us, good, bad, anything, you
Yeah.
know. So, yeah.
That's such a great point, and it brings up another question for you. Just because this is something I'm going through that I've been talking about a lot is my daughter Libby died 4 years ago now,
Mhm.
and I'm just starting to hit that point where I feel like people are forgetting.
Mm,
And I mean that, which is natural because people's lives move
yeah.
on and they don't think
Yeah.
about her every second of every day like I do. Did you
Right.
experience that as well? I mean, I'm assuming you did from what you were just
Yeah.
saying. Just
Yeah,
realize people are
absolutely.
there for a season.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Definitely people, don't remember, or they find it odd that I still remember,
Yeah.
or still do honor things. I can sometimes on a random Tuesday post about, I wonder what Olivia would be doing today because it's her senior year of, high
Right.
school. And they're
Yeah.
all like, that's weird. I'm like, well, it's not. It's very normal. It's what's in my head. I'm
Yep.
just sharing it out loud. I promise you, someone else down the block lost someone and they're thinking it. They just didn't say it out loud.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
just speaking out loud. So yeah, and I think that's I think, like I said, it's just you have to take the people that are going to be with you
Mhm.
and take them. And if they're with you for as long as, I have a best friend that's been with me for 30 years,
Yeah.
and I'm grateful for that friendship. But I know 30 years from now, we're going to be old and hopefully in the same nursing home and just, having a good old time. But there's also people that were in my life when I lost Olivia that I haven't talked to in 18 years,
Mhm.
and that's okay. It
Yeah.
took time to really be okay with that. Absolutely. Because those are people you thought would be there for
Right.
you and then they weren't. But then you'll find people that you never expected to be in your life that didn't know your situation
Right.
until later. I have a friend that I met shortly after Olivia was born, but she had no idea of my story. And she was one of the people that allowed me to share my story and held space for me,
Yeah.
even though she didn't know anything and she had her own things. And we're
That's
still
great.
friends to this day. And she lives in Wisconsin, and there'll be times where she'll go. And just a couple weeks ago, she sent me a picture and she's like, I was in the neighborhood, and she sent me a picture of Olivia's grave because she went to visit her.
Oh. That's
And she
amazing.
didn't know Olivia. She didn't get to
Yeah.
hold her. She
Oh,
didn't physically know her in any capacity. She
yeah.
only knows her as my daughter that she met through me. And she's like, she will say, she's like, there's never a little girl that I've never loved more that I've never met.
Oh,
And those are the people that
right.
you'll
Those are
find
your people.
along, yeah, those are the people you'll find along the way. And those
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
and that be open to that. Open your
That's
heart to that.
so true. Yeah. Be flexible with the support
Yeah.
system. Yep.
Yeah.
Amazing advice. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Liz. Just to kind of wrap up here, where can listeners find you and connect with your work if they're looking, for a
Yeah.
space that feels safe?
My Instagram, I spend most of my time there because I'm a millennial and that's where we are. Um, and my Instagram handle is Liz Quinn Heals.
Okay.
And then my website is the same thing, lizquinnheals.com.
Okay.
And then the podcast is called Healing Hearts Podcast.
All
And
right.
for the most part, it's on Spotify. I'm working on getting on YouTube as well. So
Okay. Well, welcome. We'd love to have you join us here on YouTube.
yes.
Well, thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate you being on the show and like I said,
Oh, it was
talking
a
about
pleasure.
something. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
fantastic. I don't often talk to people, about pregnancy or infant loss. So I'm sure there were people who were excited that you were going to be here, and I
I'm happy
appreciate
to
you
share.
taking the
Like I
time.
said, I'm an
Yeah.
open book, so feel free to pop over into my messages and ask anything. I'm happy to answer and hold space for you.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for watching and listening to the Morning Coffee Podcast. And we will be back next week with another episode. If you are watching this live or even on the replay tonight at 7 p.m., and most Sundays at 7 p.m., I do live journaling, grief journaling. So you are welcome to join me here in the YouTube channel and do some live journaling with us. It's a good time. So come on and check that out if you'd like. Otherwise, I will catch you on next week's episode, and sending love and hugs. Bye, everyone.